Hello, everyone. Matt Adams here for the Fearless Entrepreneur Podcast. In this week's episode, we are going to be discussing the weekly meeting. So let's jump right in. Anything that you got that you can relate to where fear played into your weekly meeting or a meeting? I'm going to start off with Mike. Mike, you got anything that our listeners might be interested in?
You know, there's lots of things that people can be afraid of in weekly meetings, especially if they are introverted and they don't want to really speak up. There's always that big issue of, well, I've got this great idea or I've got this grievance and I don't really want to speak about it in an open forum because I don't want to be shut down or seen as a troublemaker or whatever. Yeah, I'd say that weekly meetings are fantastic, but you have to accommodate the people that are in them. You can't just host a weekly meeting the way you want to host it. You've got to actually know the people that are in that meeting and accommodate it accordingly.
Yeah, well, I like what Mike said. I think it's important. I hadn't really thought of that, different personality types. Looking at some of the Myers-Briggs stuff right now. We'll put that in the show notes. I hadn't really thought about how important it is to accommodate to different people's style. But yeah, I think it's really important for meetings. I used to hate them, but I love them now. There's no better way to get your team on the same page, get everybody rowing in the same direction. Hold on, I'm going to come up with some more cliches. Get everybody on the same battle plan. It's a really good way for the team to come together and agree on stuff. But, there's a lot of shortfalls and shortcomings of meetings. Many of them are poorly run. There's no consistency. There's certain voices get heard too much and others not enough. So I think we're going to dig into some of that during our podcast today.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And welcome, everybody. This is episode 7 of the Fearless Entrepreneur Podcast. And this week we are going to be talking about weekly meetings. I'm your host, Matt Adams. And with me is Michael Lunt and Matthew Byrne. We are 3 business owners based in Dublin, Ohio, with a wide range of business experience, as well as equally different business ventures. We know that meetings are a necessary component to running an effective business. And there are many types of meetings that we've all been part of. So I want to ask you two about an experience where holding a meeting went either terribly wrong or proved to be tremendously successful. So think about that for a second, and I'm going to point to you, Matt Byrne. Matt, give us an example.
Well, my favorite example is the funny YouTube video called A Conference Call in Real Life. We'll put that in the show notes where they kind of mock how poorly conference calls go. People forgetting to put themselves on mute, people who think they're not on mute who are trying to talk, people dropping off the calls. It's really quite humorous. So I think we've all experienced the nightmare conference call or meeting where, everybody was kind of disconnected or playing on their phones or what have you. But I think that there's a way around that. I think it's important to have a discipline with your meetings, a certain level of cadence and flow, having a really strong agenda and being militant about sticking to it, having it, never going over the duration of time necessary, I think is also a critical step that a lot of people miss. People hate meetings because they spill on and on and on. And I think it's really important to put guardrails up for how long a meeting should last. We do standing production meetings for 15 minutes here in my company. It's not the only type of meeting we do, but one of them is, it's like meetings don't last too long if everybody has to stand in their time for 15 minutes. So a lot of times you can, do efficiencies of time and energy if you put an agenda together and put a time limit on it, whether that be an hour or 15 minutes. It's different meetings would need different durations.
How about you, Mike? I'm looking for an example of what was a successful meeting, something that you walked out of and you felt, all right, this was great.
Oh, but I had a really good, kind of addendum to that about how bad meetings can be. Let me start with that real quick, and then I'll go on to the good stuff.
Okay.
So, one thing I would say about anyone who's going to be in a meeting is just respect the people who are in the room with you. Like, your phone should be in your pocket or your bag. It shouldn't be on the table. It certainly shouldn't be screen up if it is on the table. And you should be paying attention. Like, there is nothing worse than when you're in the middle of a thought and someone answers their phone and walks out the room, because guess what happens next? When they walk in the room, you got to repeat yourself. And it's so frustrating to have like all these ideas out on the floor, and then have someone step back in and expect you to go back over everything to catch them up, because that phone call could have waited. So
it's so funny. I have my phone up to my ear too.
I'm literally looking at these two who have got their phones out now. It's great.
I'm sorry. This is serious. Focus.
But you know, but yeah, it's like it is really, really frustrating, and we've all been there. You know, where we're in a stream of consciousness, and then someone goes, "Oh, catch me up," and you're like, "No, you know, you shouldn't have left the room." But a way that something's been successful in a meeting, honestly, like some of the best meetings I've ever been to are things where, I mean, goes back to what Matt was saying about the agenda. The agenda is so important to stay on topic. Yeah. You know, we like, this is effectively what we're doing right now on these podcasts. Like, we've got a running order. We know what we want to talk about, but we're exploring our experiences, but we're not kind of going off a topic. So those are key. And then just like I mentioned it earlier, like the mutual respect, knowing how people think and operate. Those meetings that I've been in, the memorable ones at least, have all been tailored to the people that are in the room.
You know, something that's kind of dawned on me as we're talking about that. You know, Mike had mentioned we have a pretty regimented pattern of the podcast. You know, we've given it some time and thought. Now, what we say is obviously we're kind of, you know, improvising as we talk, but you know, the path forward is pretty established. But one thing that dawned on me as Mike was talking is that there's a lot of different types of meetings, and I think good meetings, how you execute a good meeting, is different based on its type, right? If it's a staff meeting, you know, then creating an environment of collaboration and trust, and making sure that different ideas get heard and the right information changes hands is critical. You know, if it's a huddle, like the 15-minute standing meeting, that has a very different cadence, a very different set of rules, and to make it successful is different than a conference call or a video conference call. Or if it's the leader trying to disseminate mission and vision, that might be a one-way meeting, right, where the leader is telling people. Most of the time, though, a meeting is supposed to be a collaborative gathering of the stakeholders, and needs to kind of follow a certain decorum and a certain cadence.
I would say as well that there is like a level that you should aim for. Like, if you can have an in-person meeting, always aim for that. And then it should be video conference call. And then lastly, it should be phone call, like a phone-in conference call, because there's nothing like having an important discussion face-to-face. And obviously, if you can't be there, then video is the next best thing. Let's be honest, we've all had really horrific phone conference calls because everyone's talking over one another and we've got no idea what's happening, and you're so focused on when it's your time to interject that you're not really hearing any comments that have come before. So
I agree. So Mike, I got to ask you now, I know you are a very organized person, and especially when it comes to your own project management,
probably to a fault,
maybe. So talk to me a little bit about how you handle meetings, because, you know, from what I understand, you know, you'll meet with your various vendors when you're working on collaborative projects, but it's just you in your office. There's not a team necessarily where you need to do a standing meeting. How do you apply some of these concepts and benefits from meetings into your own business?
Well, I have a beta fish in my office, so I just talk to that.
I actually was in his office today and was playing with that beta fish. I took my phone and turned it around in selfie mode and showed the beta fish a picture of himself. He got all agitated. Did he not?
Yeah, he did.
Maybe it's an alpha fish.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But no, I think if you can't take the same principles that you apply in a team meeting and apply them just to a piece of paper that you might be working on, a document, it's the same kind of thing, right? It's you're working an idea out in your mind and you're putting it down on paper. Well, okay, it might be not as fluid as a conversation with, you know, a team member or several team members, but you can still work out a hell of a lot through a document. So that's kind of how I do it. Like, if I've got an idea, I'll sketch something out, or I will write it down and I'll just kind of keep working through it. But I take a lot of principles that are found in meetings. Like, I have an agenda. I have to be regimented when it comes to that kind of stuff. Otherwise, I'll never get anything else done. I mean, Matt, you've commented numerous times when you've come into my office and seen my calendar, you're like, how do you not get overwhelmed? It's like, well, if I have my calendar laid out this way, I can see what's coming next down the pipes. It's no different really than how you might run a meeting.
Well, and I think the solopreneurs are dealing with meetings with colleagues, with subcontractors, with clients, and the need for good meeting and successful, productive meetings exists there. It's just it's almost like if you're working on your own, you're really doing some sort of like strategic planning or kind of I think fails to meet the definition of quote unquote a meeting. But I'm sure you have plenty of meetings with clients and subcontractors, right?
Well, yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I work that way, is because obviously if I am not practiced in some way, shape or form, those client meetings can go horribly. It's one of the reasons why I feel like I'm quite adaptable in a client meeting. I don't pretend to be an expert on the subject matter that I'm going to make a video about. I'm an expert in video production, but I always tell my clients, you are going to understand your customers better than I could ever hope to. So my goal in a meeting is to let them talk at me, tell me everything they can, and be a sponge for that knowledge, and know how to handle different types of personalities. The quiet person that's not sure their idea is great, and the boisterous person that is absolutely certain that their idea needs to be in the video.
Yeah.
You have to adapt to those types of people very easily. I had one meeting where I think I inadvertently offended the client by saying they need to be pushing the videos that they're making out online and social media, and I didn't mean it in the way that they took it. So you could destroy a relationship if you don't know how to handle the next step of that meeting, which is to basically say, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, you need to be thinking about what are the stages that you're going to apply to this video that we're making, in my case.
I think you can avoid some of that with being consistent in your meetings. Now, like so Matt Byrne, I've been, as a vendor, I've sat in on occasion to some of your team meetings. We talked about different projects, and you run a pretty tight ship when it comes to how you flow with your meetings. And you and I are both very familiar with the level 10 meeting. Perhaps you can talk to that or speak to that for our audience.
Yeah, sure. I think that the real goal of a meeting, at least in my opinion as an entrepreneur, the goal of a meeting is to identify what strategically needs to be done, who's committing to do an element of what needs to be done, and documenting that for an accountability standpoint. Right? A meeting is not there for me to pontificate. A meeting is not for us to argue or fight. A meeting is about really establishing priorities and identifying an accountability chart of who is going to execute what elements of the strategy. And then the final thing a meeting is solving problems and processing and dealing with issues. And so, as Matt Adams mentioned, there's a video called the Level 10 Meeting, and it's a great format to run a meeting. And some of the elements we apply are incorporated in that meeting. But one of the things is it starts on time and it ends on time. It happens at the same time every day. It has the same agenda. And by the way, starting on time, early is on time is late. So you show up 5 or 10 minutes early, ready to go. And and so you follow that same agenda. It's a timed agenda. Like literally each element is, the first few elements are 5 minutes apiece. At 5 minutes and 1 second, a timer goes off and you say, all right, we'll talk about that next week at the same meeting. We're moving on to the next item. Yeah. Moving on.
God, I wish I'd been part of so many meetings that did that. They just went on and on and on. I also hate it when everyone is there on time except like 1 or 2 people. And then the guy or the girl who's running the meeting just goes, well, let's hold off for another 5 minutes. And it's like, well, wait a minute. What's to say that in 55 minutes time, all of us in the room aren't going to have something else that we need to move on to? You're literally telling everyone we're going to slide the meeting up 5 minutes. And that could mean the difference between you being stuck in rush hour traffic or
not. Being on time is a choice, in my opinion. There's nothing worse than that. Oh, there's many things worse, but that's annoying.
And we create a culture of that. Like it's everybody's, and it starts with the leader. You know what? You think you're too busy. You think, oh, I've got this important meeting. I got this sales good thing. I've got this business plan that needs to get written. I'm going to skip the meeting or I'm going to show up late because I was talking to an important client. Unacceptable. You are talking about every person in your organization who matters, collaborating for an hour and a half. These meetings are 90 minutes long. But what they do is they create less work for the owner because it gives you a place to curate the strategy, assign tasks and responsibilities, hold people accountable to those, because each week you come back to that same list of stuff they agreed upon last week, and to put, to eliminate and process roadblocks so that you can, lubricate the success of the organization. And you have to be on time, and you have to never miss this meeting, and then hold everybody else to that same standard.
God,
starts with you.
You're right. You know what? And summer has wreaked havoc on that approach for us. I am guilty of not being consistent and having the meeting every week because you got different people in and out with vacations, and myself, and so. And I can see the result of that. I mean, the team's now coming to me. Things are getting a little haphazard. Having that weekly meeting needs to start.
Yeah, starting on time, ending on time, and happening the same time every week. And you make the meeting unless you're on vacation, but that's a week or two a year, or you're in the hospital. Those are the different rules, And it's funny, my team, we have a fun culture, but I got people joke and be like, I'm going to be at the beach, but I'm calling in for the level 10 meeting, because they want to be a part of it. Now they're half kidding. They're not really going to be there. But, sometimes if someone's kid is homesick, believe me, they call into the level 10 meeting. They show up to that meeting no matter what happens. That meeting happens every week at the exact same time and the exact same agenda without fail. And we've been doing it for 3 or 4 years. And probably one of the most important tools in my entire business arsenal. And as you've heard from earlier podcasts, I've owned my own business of various shapes and sizes for the last 30 years. And the level 10 meeting, numero uno. If you decide to terminate your following of this podcast at this moment, do yourself a favor, master the level 10 meeting. If you don't learn anything else, please learn that.
Yeah, I think regardless of the meeting type, consistency and follow through on action items are key. So each issue should have an action item or items. And each action item should have one person who's listed as being responsible for that.
Yeah, good point.
Mike, I want to ask you, so from some of the things that you've heard here today, or maybe some resources that you haven't shared yet, is there anything that you would like to recommend to our audience in terms of resources or key takeaway points?
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of, it's called Winning with Accountability. It's a book. You can grab it on Amazon. I think it was a New York Times bestseller at one point. It's a really easy read, but it's got some really powerful themes in there. And the book's by a guy called Henry Evans. He talks about ambiguity as like the cardinal sin of business, basically. And I use that like a Bible for any kind of meeting that I do. Remember that when you go into a meeting, you're going in there to address vague information. Like the whole point is for you to come out with clarity, not to come out even more confused than you went in. And that typically will happen if you don't have an agenda and you don't have a commitment. If I've talked about this in a previous episode, that if you come out with sayings like, I'll get it to you ASAP or by the end of day, well, what if you're working with a client that's in San Francisco? End of day is 8 p.m. on the East Coast and 5 p.m. on the West Coast. So there's, ambiguity there that could actually hurt. So for me, that's probably a big resource on how to just change your way of thinking that can absolutely 100% affect how you run a meeting. So that would be my biggest takeaway. I also really enjoyed what Matt said about keeping things regimented in the sense of same time, same place, every week, and the same duration. That's also key.
Yeah.
Don't let these things become just as long as you want them to be.
So Matt,
like this response.
Matt Byrne, beyond the level 10 meeting, any other resources or takeaway points that you'd like to make?
I really like Mike's talking about anticipating other people's personality style. I think I want to workshop that a little bit on my end. So that was a good takeaway for me. A clear agenda, crucial. And these meetings, should not be an opportunity for you as the leader to wax poetically although there are certain meetings and formats for that. They're to empower your team to help in the decision-making process and creating an accountability for the implementation of those strategic decisions. They love that, you will love it, and they will love it. You know, because they're part of the process, and they have clarity on what you want and what you've all agreed upon, you know? So those are my takeaways from that.
You know, one of the things I didn't mention and want to is, you know, if there's a sort of a tool or software that you use to help support your meeting. Now, in our particular case, we use project management software, and what works well for us is an online product called Asana. We make sure that on our team meetings that we've got an action item and it is placed into Asana or some other software after every meeting. This improves accountability. So it's not just talking about it and hearing it. We can see it during the week, so that if, you know, we don't need to wait until the following Monday or the following Tuesday to find out there's a problem, especially if it's time sensitive. You know, we can see it right there happening in the deliverables. All right, folks, this podcast, it is available on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, and wherever else you get your podcasts. We encourage you to subscribe to hear the latest episodes as they are released. And please don't forget to give us a review. It will really help us out to reach more entrepreneurs like you.
If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, post a comment below or on our Facebook page. And if you have any resources or tips or tricks, you know, this is an entrepreneurial community. We invite you to leave those ideas in the comments below.
And don't forget, you can also follow us on Facebook at the Fearless Entrepreneur Podcast. And you can also read more about each of us on our website. It's thefearlessentrepreneur.podcast.com.
And that is it from us this week. So until next time, everybody, #stay fearless.